Welcome once again to another episode of Off the Menu. I'm your host, Vincent Franchini from Tumblr House, here with a somnambulant Charles Coulombe.
Somnambulant? Like a sleepwalker?
Yes.
Like I've just been going through these days and nights under lockdown. Just sleepwalking my way through life. Is that it?
Yeah, like it's a dream.
There's a certain amount of truth to that, I have to admit. But I have decided to change the whole thing. I'm changing it now.
Okay.
Well, I'll tell you what I mean. Right now, you feel that everybody that we're talking to across this great, miraculous globe of ours that we live on, this island Earth upon which we dwell, everyone is feeling sort of antsy and restless, like trapped animals, going backwards and forwards in their little pens that their masters have locked them into. Well, wrong.
Yeah.
I've got a whole new way of looking at it. You ready?
Yeah.
It's safe here. We're all locked inside in safety, and we can be comfortable and warm. And outside, it's all badness and horror. But in here, it's comfy and safe. Now, do you see how that completely turns the whole thing around?
How?
Well, instead of being your prison, your home becomes your refuge.
The refuge of a person who's going to have a nervous breakdown or something.
Well, then maybe you need to find refuge for yourself. But you've got to get away from the whole nervous breakdown thing.
Oh, okay, got it. Okay, okay.
All right. Remember, badness is out there. You're under siege right now.
Yeah.
But you're safe within the walls. Basically, outside it's all vampires, and zombies, and aliens, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
If you remember The Walking Dead, The Strain, and Falling Skies, they're all happening at once.
Yeah.
So we've got aliens, vampires, and zombies to contend with. Now don't you feel better staying inside?
Yes, absolutely.
See? It's all a question of point of view.
You know, thinking of the dream aspect and how the days are all starting to run together, it reminds me of a funny thing I saw on TV yesterday where I think it was the weatherman on ABC News. He was doing it. He says, "Oh, we're finally at the weekend," and then he paused for. I was like, "What?" Like I paused, like, "So what? It's the weekend, okay." And he had to walk it back. He's like, "Oh well, yeah, I know the days are starting to run together," because like the notion like happy weekend, I guess.
How's it different for the week?
It was funny though because he had to catch himself a little bit. Like, no, not happy weekend exactly.
Well, normality is coming. Normality is coming. And I would remind you that our Jewish friends, specifically of the Chabad Lubavitcher variety, have a bumper sticker.
Okay.
And the bumper sticker says, "Hang in there, baby. Shabbos is coming," meaning the Sabbath, the day off. So, in that spirit, I say, hang in there, baby. Normality is coming. But who really wants to go back to normality anyway?
Warren G. Harding.
Well, that's true, but he wanted to go back to normalcy. He coined that word for the occasion. It never existed until he made it up, That's
return to normalcy.
The return to normalcy.
That's not a word, really?
No, well, it is now, but he coined it.
Oh, okay.
The word was normality, and he said normalcy, and it was, well, okay. But I think Harding, the we need a presidential candidate of either or a third or fourth or fifth party to stand up and run on that platform. A return to normalcy. Now, but I was very impressed. Biden has vowed to bring the troops home from Watergate.
Poor Biden.
I think it's wonderful. I'm going into the senior citizen status myself, so I think it's great that seniors are still showing they can contribute.
That's good.
Yeah. It's senility need not stand in your way of giving back.
I agree.
Just because you've got dementia or Alzheimer's doesn't mean you can't be a fully functioning member of society, maybe even in charge. I think it's great.
I don't know. I don't know about that.
It offers hope for people my age.
I don't care about your hope.
You don't care about my hope?
No, I don't care about your hope.
Well, that's too bad for you, isn't it?
I want to live in a society somewhat akin to Logan's Run.
Oh, well, I'm afraid you'd be on the short end of that stick
that
now.
makes me true. Well, I would elongate the.
Yeah, I'm sure you would.
Red, I would elongate the duration until you get the red button to coincide coincidentally with my age.
Yeah, except if you'd still be out of luck.
Why is that?
Well, because if you say, you only have to be stuffed at 40, that's your age. So how do you? All it means is that you'll still be around now, and they get stuffed.
Well, okay. Well, then I'll make it 1 year higher than me.
So then you've got a year. So what? That's the problem. You see, you're already past your best buy date.
I don't know. I'll find a way to turn it into a utopia.
You want to turn to a utopia, you've got to go back to the world of my childhood.
Oh. See, now that... You made this point a long time ago. Now, that is everyone's return to normalcy.
Yeah.
The period of their childhood is what's normal to them.
Yeah. And as life gets increasingly different from that as you get older.
Yeah.
It gets increasingly weird.
Yeah.
And so for me, normality is really 1964. That is what's in my head. Mind you, I don't sit around thinking about it all the time.
Yeah.
But that's what I evaluate things by. Now, having said all that, and speaking as a somnambulist, I have to point out that our audience will be watching this on May 3rd. They'll already have missed yesterday's two great celebrations.
May 4th.
May 1st.
May 4th. No, today.
Oh, it'll be May 4th.
Yeah, this is Saturday, May 2nd.
Yeah. So right. So May 4th is when they'll be getting this, but they'll have missed out on Friday's great celebrations. I'm not talking about May Day, or St. Joseph the Worker, though that's a great day, or Saints Philip and James. No. I'm talking about two American holidays. American holidays that were put into being by that great American president, the one I was born under, Dwight D. Eisenhower. Yes, that's right. The man who shepherded under God through Congress and into the Pledge of Allegiance. The man who was first started out with the National Prayer Breakfast. That guy, Dwight D. Eisenhower. Well, he gave us not one, but two great holidays on May 1st.
Boy, that must have just slipped by me. What were the two holidays?
What do they teach them in these schools?
I'm sorry, Charles.
Well, the first, to honor the majesty, the goodness of the law, the common law that we inherited from England and rendered perfect in the United States. It's Law Day.
No one wants to celebrate the law.
What do you mean? Of course you want to celebrate the law. If it weren't for the law, you'd lose your rights.
The law is restrictive on our freedoms.
No, it's not. If it weren't for the law, you wouldn't be able to go out of your house.
Wait a minute. Wait.
Okay, let's move on. So that's Law Day. The second is even more wonderful. You ready?
Okay.
It's Loyalty Day.
To King George?
No, not to King George. To the history, institutions, culture of liberty of these United States, of the American way, the American system. This is a day to wave the flag, to say the Pledge of Allegiance, to read the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, to reconsecrate ourselves as a people, as a nation, as 50 sovereign states plus their attendant territories and possessions, to the ideals of freedom in which this country was conceived, etc.
That's way too abstract.
Okay.
I'm not really big on like ideals and things.
Oh, all right. Well, how about loyalty to the country that gave us birth, to which our ancestors came and from which we've derived a great deal of benefit?
Well, okay, if we've derived benefit from it, that's good. It's all about
We derived
me.
a lot of benefit from
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. That's good. Okay,
It's
loyalty.
Loyalty Day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Loyalty Day.
Yeah.
But that was yesterday. So,
Okay. Yeah, because it's all about what the country can do for me.
have you considered running for president?
You know what keeps sticking in my mind though? I can't get it out of my head. Is your brilliant line? What were we talking about? We were talking about Trump's stimulus with the $1,000, and you said it's hard not to vote for Santa Claus.
Yeah, that's right.
And that has been ingrained in my mind the entire time, and thinking about it and connecting it to Christophe Buffon de Chazal's End of Democracy, where he says it's always going to be totalitarian because people value security over liberty. He says liberty is too abstract. And security, in other words, they're voting for Santa Claus.
Well, wait a minute. That's not true. Do you know how I can prove?
How?
Look at the resistance to the lockdown.
Okay. Where are we going here?
Well, I'm just going to say the reason why he's wrong is that people refuse the lockdown, which offered security, in the name of liberty.
Oh, gosh. You're trying to tie me into a pretzel with this one now.
No, I'm not. That's why the churches are open.
All right. Well,
What?
I guess perhaps in this case we just gone a little too far. And by security, I mean
Being safe inside, because out there it's all badness. I told you, it's vampires, zombies, and aliens out there.
I mean, you could argue it's not security because how is it secure being on the bread lines?
Well, because that's not the first thing that it's involving. The security being offered is security for the disease.
I mean, I don't know. On Bloomberg, looking at the data of all the states, there's a lot of states where it already did its peak, and now it's well on its way down. So I don't know.
I recently read, I haven't actually looked at the thing itself, it just slipped by me. But supposedly the CDC has recategorized a bunch of deaths from COVID to the flu.
Well, that's one thing that Elon Musk was talking about, in that I've heard anecdotally from local vendors too, where old people who have a lot of complications already, and they end up incidentally getting corona, just end up dying, and they write coronavirus on there. And Father Spitzer last night said this can't be true, because he said the average age of people who die from corona is 80 years old.
I heard that today.
If that is actually true, that is extraordinary. I don't. Wow.
I hope it's not true. Now, I know how that sounds, but I'll tell you why I say that. Because if it is true, how do I put this? It would be better for everybody involved if the measures that were taken were at least to some degree justifiable. If it should turn out that they weren't, or, which amounts to the same thing, the majority of people come to think they weren't, regardless of whether or not they were, that could give a lot of trouble down the line. Because all people have to think is that the economy was screwed up for nothing. And see, the funny thing is, where the Trumpsters, I've said this last week, I think, but I'll say it again, where the Trumpster has been very smart is leaving the details to the states. Now, mind you, that's the constitutional thing to do anyway. I don't know how deeply devoted he is to the Constitution, because it's also smart politics, but it is the constitutional thing. So, if it turns out that everything was as bad as threatened and all this kind of thing, and everything has been justified, then he's in a position to say, well, you know, the governors did a great job and I bankrolled them. But if not, he can say, well, it's your governor.
I'm really worried about Michigan, actually.
What's that?
That governor has already extended it until the end of May already. And what she did, she said something very, very stupid. And she said, you know, because in terms of the resistance and the protests, she characterized them, you know, very subtlety. She said, you know, these people who have swastikas and Confederate flags and all this. And he said, that's not who we are. And I thought, wait a minute. What did you just do here? So basically,
crazy chick.
Anyone who disagrees with me is a racist or a Nazi.
Yeah.
You know, even to do that to you know, fair-minded people, you've just slit your own throat for the next election.
I'll say. I mean, that's madness. And of course, the other thing too that's very disturbing about all this is the way the medicine has gotten politicized.
Yeah.
I mean, frankly, it's wrong. It's wrong to consider someone who's in favor of the lockdown. Let's put it this way. It's wrong to think that the lockdown... No, I don't say wrong because it ought not to be. That's a better way to put it. It ought not to be that you support or oppose the lockdown on the basis of whether you're a quote-unquote liberal or quote-unquote conservative. The disagreement should purely be, is this the prudent thing to do? But instead, like every other bloody thing in our country, it is getting dragged into the Great Divide. And this governess of Michigan played into it. You know, I'm not going to say who or what, but somebody asked me if she was the model for the President Star Spangled Crown.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
That would be a good one, actually.
Well, I never even heard of her when I wrote the bloody thing. I didn't actually have anybody in mind, really.
Yeah.
I just thought, you know, she was a generic... if I had anybody in mind, it was the mayoress of Baltimore, frankly.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah. But I mean, I wasn't really thinking of Hillary Clinton. I wasn't thinking of this woman who I didn't even know about then. You know. But I think when you've succeeded in creating a decent character, people will read that character into, oh, it must have been, so-and-so must have been the inspiration for it. No. But it's a type that so-and-so fits.
It's a motif, yeah.
Yeah. It's a motif. I mean, you remember The Man Without a Country?
No. Was that an old spy movie? What is that?
No, it was written by a man named Edward Everett Hale, and it was written about the time of the Civil War. And basically, it's about a fellow who, shortly after the War of 1812, conspired against the United States, like Aaron Burr or Sevier, or people like that. He's arrested, and during his court-martial, he explodes, and he says, "Damn the United States. I pray that I may never hear that name again." And the judges sort of pull themselves together, horrified, but they whisper among themselves and said, "Captain Nolan will get his wish. He will never hear the name of the United States again." And so he's put on a ship, and that ship never comes back to the States until when it's going to. He's transferred to another ship, and another ship, and another ship. And no one is supposed to mention the United States to him ever. He's never supposed to hear its name. His U.S. Army buttons are taken and replaced by plain ones. So, in the story, Edward Everett Hale, his narrator, meets Nolan on a ship and learns his story. And of course, it's in the midst of the Civil War. He takes pity on him. And then Nolan invites him into his room, and he sees that he's made a map. Because he's put together things he's heard over the years.
Yeah.
So he's drawn a map of what he thinks the states look like now. Bear in mind that when he was put away, it was only half the size it became.
Yeah.
So the narrator makes some adjustments, and he's got a homemade flag in there, and he's become Mr. Super Patriot. Well, the narrator, when he realizes this, the problem is that the sealed orders that come with Nolan are passed on year after year, and so all of his judges are dead. Everybody who knew anything is dead. It's just an automatic thing. So not Hale, but his narrator goes to Washington afterwards and tries to get a pardon, but in the meantime, Nolan dies and is buried at sea. So he never comes home. It was called The Man Without a Country. Well, I mention this because after he wrote the story, he started running into people who claimed to have met him. Captain Nolan.
Oh, wow.
Yep. And, people would write him, "Yes, in 1853, when I was serving on the USS, Griswold or whatever, Captain Nolan was our prisoner at that time. Wow. He took out a life of his own." And it was the same with Arthur Machen and the Angels of Mons when he wrote a story about the trench warfare in the beginning of World War I. And the Germans were about to overwhelm this section of the line. And suddenly the Angels of Agincourt appeared and drove them off. Well, he made it up. But tons of people who had actually been at the front claimed to have seen them after that.
I see.
That's how people are.
Yeah. Well, it's good writing.
Yeah.
Okay, so
several good things for you. I'm very happy to tell you that both the boys and girls dorms in the Tumbler House Tower are very content.
Of course,
they're very happy.
They always are. They always are. What? You don't need to tell me what's going on in my business, Charles.
Yeah, I think I do. Because you think, you made it clear before that you think I'm kind of a subversive when it comes to labor issues, at least as far as Tumbler House are concerned.
Because you are.
I'm not a subversive. I'm here to help. I'm like the government. And so, I'm happy to tell you that everybody is extremely happy. I talked to Tyrone's second in command, Morris, and Morris said to me, "I just got to have a job." That's a direct quote.
Yeah.
I asked him, I said, "Are you enjoying the working conditions? Is everything all right?" And he said, "I just have to have a job." So
good. He's happy.
Yeah. The orders are up apparently. Now, the only slight discontent is the motor pool.
Because, well, obviously, okay.
Yeah, because they haven't been out of the they haven't even been able to take the cars out since the lockdown. I mean, you really locked the joint down. I mean, locked.
Yeah, locked. What?
Well, you can't get in or out of the Tumbler House Tower.
I'm just obeying regulations, Charles.
I see. Following Governor Newsom's lead.
And Mayor Garcetti for the county of Los Angeles.
So basically, you're hunkering down for the duration, is what you're telling me.
Yeah, we're following orders, but what do you want from me, Charles? What do you want from me?
2 hours in the meditation garden.
Denied. Anything else?
1 hour.
What? What did you say?
1 hour in the meditation garden.
You're in Austria, buddy.
Yeah, I know, but you can set the camera up. I mean, I can at least look at the thing.
Set the camera up? Okay.
Yeah, in the meditation garden.
I can do that. There's no risk of contamination or anything in that case.
No, and I could have like a live stream of the meditation garden. I think that would be really helpful for my mental health.
If that improves your mental health, Charles, I can do that for you. I
think it would be very, very good. The other thing is that apparently, and I shouldn't say this, especially with what's going on, but anyway.
But you will.
What's that?
But you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I will. Apparently, the 13th floor has been extremely quiet.
Yeah.
They're self-locked down. No more shots of purple light coming from the 13th floor on the outside.
Yeah, well,
it was the purple light that really upset the neighbors,
I can see that. It's alarming.
Yeah. And I remember back, before I came over here the last time, so back in early February, late January, I remember I was walking down the street outside the compound there, and the old lady across the street, the old Chinese lady, she came up to me, and she demanded to know what the purple light was coming out of the 13th floor. And I tried to help her, and I said, "Ma'am, the building doesn't have a 13th floor." And she said, "Oh, it does, it does." So she put it up, and I counted her, on the outside. I said, "Look, 32, 31, 30, all the way down." And I said, "You see, there's no 13th floor." And she looked and she said, "But the light came from," I said, "That's either the 12th or the 14th. Mm-hmm. There is no 13th.
Yeah.
So I figured, I don't know your relationship with your neighbors, so I figured it was best to hold on to the party line,
Yeah. No, that's good. Good job, Charles. Good job.
Did what I could.
Yeah. So, okay. All right, let's get into the memes of production. By golly.
Nationalize the memes of production.
Let's nationalize them. Let's continue the political line of thought. You all know that I'm a huge fan of the Babylon Bee, and they had such a good news headline. I just couldn't refuse. I couldn't help but show it. Vicious tyrant Trump wants to let people leave their homes. So I'll read the article. By all accounts, President Donald Trump has now gone completely mad with power. In a press briefing, he laid out his insidious plan. Quote, "When I'm done with this country, everyone will be able to leave their houses whenever they want and do whatever they want," Trump told the press with an evil grin. "They'll be able to peaceably assemble in whatever size group they desire. Mwahahaha. You're a madman," a CNN reporter cried. "You don't have the power to let people have freedom. You're a tyrant." "My power is absolute," Trump screamed. "No one can stop me. Soon everyone will be able to go back to work and buy whatever they feel like from the store, even if bureaucrats don't like it. No, cried an MSNBC reporter. You have to arrest people who don't do what the government tells them. Who do you think you are? Someone stop him. I'm sorry, but this is just too close to reality. I mean, this is reality. I mean,
Well,
you know,
that's I've heard it from so many people that the problem with the Babylon Bee now is that it's the best informed newspaper of record.
That's hardly off from reality. I mean, other than the fake quotes.
It is very sad.
Okay. Let's see what else we got. Oh, this other thing we have is interesting. We've got a picture of Charles with one of his friends, and it says, "Some of you are not as woke as you think you are." Can you explain what's going on here, Charles? Because I have to say, it's somewhat disconcerting.
Well, okay. The fellow who's pictured there is actually my godson, one of the tribe, in beautiful Cambridge. He's a student there. He's a doctoral student in Cambridge.
Okay, got it.
Beyond that, I'm not quite sure what it means.
No, this seems to be like a gang sign. This seems to be like promoting violence. This is like shoot people.
Are you feeling threatened?
I am feeling threatened. What is this? What is this subversive thing? Are you some
not
sort
quite
of
sure.
vigilante? You don't know
Not
why
quite sure.
you guys are both doing gun signs.
We might have been drinking. I don't know.
You might have been drinking.
There's that possibility.
Did you kill anybody while you're drinking? I mean, you don't know what you're doing when you're drinking?
No, it's just that I'm not always sure in retrospect of the significance of a given act. I'll remember doing it, but I may not remember exactly why I did it.
So that's just random things, yeah.
It could have been a random thing, yeah.
That's scary to me.
What, by being random?
You being dangerously random.
Oof, dangerously random. Now, see, there could be a future adjective for a show. The dangerously random Charles Coulombe.
It's true.
Chaotic neutral.
Okay, that was good. Shout out to Dungeons and Dragons players. Okay. That's you. Wow, the chaotic neutral Charles Coulombe. Nobody's on your side, or you're on nobody's side because nobody's on your side.
I'm like an ant.
You're like an ant. Wow, there it is.
Yeah.
That's so you. This is it.
And I'm here to create difficulties for whoever needs them, whether they realize it or not.
Wow.
You've no idea how badly you needed your life to be turned into a living circus. Well, I'm here for you.
Okay, before we start the questions, just reminding people, we need more subscribers. We're shooting for 10,000, so if you aren't subscribed yet, please subscribe. If you like our videos, please click like. If you'd like to see more content each week, for as low as $1 a month, you can become a patron subscriber. We just did another pre-show.
Long pre-show.
Over an hour. So that's like, we're on like a streak now. Like I noticed like ever since like this thing happened, our pre-shows have been like an hour long.
That's true.
So it's a lot. It's basically almost double the content. So on to the questions. The first question. What?
Is this question void where prohibited?
This question is especially not void where prohibited because it's from a top money man, a top floor executive, Jonathan.
Wow, CODs accepted?
Yeah, for our top money man, Jonathan, you betcha.
No, okay, CODs.
So you better answer his questions good.
Answerers are standing by.
We need good answers. We can't be disappointing Jonathan, okay? This is important. There's a lot of money riding on this. All right.
As shown on TV.
Okay. Question for Mr. Charles. The first from my father, George. Why wasn't Blessed Karl allowed to return to his home so he could die in the land he loved, instead of dying on an island in the Atlantic? So what happened here? Sounds like Napoleon.
Well, it is a bit. Why indeed? Well, it's because his captors were evil people. You know, the worthless dog Karl Renner certainly didn't want him back in Austria, where he might retake the throne, save for Admiral Horthy in Hungary and Thomas Masaryk in Czechoslovakia. So they certainly didn't want him back.
What were the specific areas of contention? Like, we need you gone because we want to do X, Y,
Well,
Z.
the basic thing was this. The fear was that if he came back, he would destabilize the region. He might reunite Austria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and the little Entente, who were the neighboring countries, Yugoslavia, Romania, Poland, and Czechoslovakia, who had taken a lot of territory out of Austria-Hungary, were afraid that if he came back, you know, he would basically strip them of their gains. The Entente powers, the major Entente, as it were, France, Britain, the United States, they did not want him there because, of course, he had been defeated in World War I by them. And they considered him also a threat to the order that they had installed in Central Europe, which, as we know, would later turn to a power vacuum and collapse of its own weight and bring us first the Nazis and then the communists. But, you know, 20/20 hindsight and all that. So he was told that he could go back to Austria if he would renounce the throne.
Okay.
But he wouldn't do it. So, refusing to renounce the throne, he was shipped off. Initially he was sent to Switzerland. Twice he tried to retake the throne of Hungary, and that was when they shipped him off to Madeira after the second attempt. Now, they not only was his property in Austria seized by the Austrian government, but the Entente did not allow his supporters to send him money. So he had nothing. He had no money at all. And that meant he had to move out of the hotel that they'd installed him in. And a local person lent him his summer villa for free to live in. But it was a summer villa, and it was up in the mountains. Now, for various reasons, the emperor already had bad lungs. So this kid, it killed him. Why did it work out that way? Well, for two reasons. One, he lost, and two, the people he lost to were not good people.
What year did he die?
1922. The centennial is coming up.
How old was he?
32, 33, something like that. 34. He was young. He was born in the 1880s.
Let's, if he was alive in, let's say by the time World War II is coming around, and he is still alive, and the king of Austria, or the emperor, excuse me, what do you think his impact would have been on either perhaps preventing World War II or hindering Hitler?
Firstly, if he had stayed on the throne in Austria and Hungary, just as a minimum, just the two countries, obviously if they'd had Czechoslovakia as well, that would have been more. I think in all likelihood, Germany too would have retained the monarchy. I don't think Hitler would have risen to power.
Really?
Yeah.
That's quite a statement.
Well, yeah, but Churchill made it before I did.
But the German people were so angry, so just because...
They were angry. You got to remember a few things. Firstly, one of the reasons why the monarchies fell in Europe was because President Wilson declared that until they were overthrown, they would not lift the blockade. Now, the Germans and the Austro-Hungarians were literally starving to death. The blockade was horrendous. They were desperate. Had they not insisted on regime change as the price of an end to the blockade, things would have been very, very different. But they basically gave the peoples of Austria and Germany a choice. You can keep your current ruler and starve, or dump him and eat. Yes, that was what we did. That was Mr. Woodrow Wilson. Self-determination and all that. So, that basically caused all sorts of problems, and the Kaiser fled the country. All the other German rulers were deposed, and the emperor basically, it was an interesting thing. He allowed the formation of national councils in every part of the empire. He had wanted to federate the empire, federalize it, the way his uncle had wanted to do. But he had never been in a position to do so. He finally got the chance, but it was too late. And all these national councils, including the one in German Austria, declared independence while his government was still there. But at that, he refused to abdicate either the Austrian or the Hungarian throne, and simply said he was withdrawing from government. And then in Hungary, the government that replaced him was overthrown by a communist named Belekun, and they had a Soviet republic for a number of months that murdered a whole lot of people. Gave him a little taste, of what Russia had gone through. And the same thing happened in Bavaria. Now, had the Allies not done that, I think it would have been very, very different. The Germans would never have been as desperate as they were. Neither would the Austrians have been. And they would have had sane governments that one could deal with. But, it was interesting that the two attempts that the emperor made to retake the Hungarian throne was actually done with the tacit encouragement of the French government. Now, this is interesting because, of course, the French had been his enemies in the war. But they had also been very much aware of his attempts to make peace. When my book comes out, you'll see the tragic story of his peacemaking attempts. It was really a tragic thing. If he had had his way, the war would have ended a year or 2 years earlier. But nobody else was interested in peace except the Pope. And he, of course, wasn't a combatant. So, anyway, Briand, who was the French prime minister at the time, was worried that Poland, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, and Romania, his allies, would not be sufficient either to restrain the Soviets or to restrain a renascent German bloc. In other words, he was already afraid of somebody like Hitler as early as 1921. So he had the bright idea that if Karl came back, either in Austria or Hungary or both, number one, he'd be pro-French. And number two, at least geographically speaking, there'd be a center that future resistance, either to the Soviet Union or to Germany, could coalesce around. Thirdly, what he was afraid of was that if he didn't do something like that, then both Austria and Hungary, and mind you, this is before Mussolini came in, but he was afraid that both Hungary and Austria would become pro-Italian, which they ended up doing. So, long and the short of it was that he told Karl that if he succeeded in retaking the throne, France would ensure that the Little Entente their allies, left them alone. And France would make huge loans to get the economy going again. If he won. If he failed, they would deny all knowledge of anything. And that's what happened. So, I made the statement I made. Had he stayed emperor over something, Austria, Hungary, whatever else, and if the Hohenzollerns had been kept in Germany, there would have been no Hitler.
Wow. Whew.
Oh, it's a horrible story. It's very tragic. The only bright point to it is, well, there are two. One is that he's a blessed, and his empress is a servant of God. Her cause for beatification has been introduced. So he's certainly in heaven. And Central Europe today, partly to some degree, I think, because of the spread of his cultus there, is perhaps coming together a bit more.
That is a tough pill to swallow. This is one of those things where I feel you just have to fall back and say, God is in charge.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, that's what he had to do.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Yeah, more than any, I'm sure. Obviously.
Yeah. He, that's why he's in the running for canonization. It's why he has his two miracles. Because he took all of this as God's will, and he rolled with it. He did his very best, and if that didn't work, well, what are you going to do? I mean, one of the interesting things about him is that, like Bonnie Prince Charlie, the Jacobite fellow in Scotland, like him, he had an incredible intuition as to what would work.
Yeah.
Like him, he had older and wiser, quote unquote, advisors who basically got in his way and overruled him. But he was actually right, the way Bonnie Prince Charlie was right. But the difference between the two men is that Bonnie Prince Charlie's defeat destroyed him. I mean, he lived for a long time afterwards, but it wrecked him and destroyed him. Not so Blessed Emperor Charles. He persevered. And the interesting thing is that he and his wife conceived even in exile. Their 8th child was born after he died.
I see.
But yeah, it is a bitter swill to Apollo. Yes, a bitter pill to swallow.
Yeah.
Boy.
Okay. That was quite an answer. Jonathan's second question. Charles, you have said you met the claimant to the Portuguese throne and the former king of Sudan, or Rwanda. I apologize for forgetting.
Rwanda.
How many former monarchs, claimants, or current monarchs have you met, and what are they like?
Well, I've met the king of Sweden. I've met the king of Portugal. I met the king of Italy. I have met the rightful emperor of Austria. I've met the king of Rwanda. The only one of them I really have gotten to know was the king of Rwanda. The others I met socially, all very nice. The rightful emperor of Austria was good enough to give me a foreword for my book, and I've met him a couple of times. I know his father. What are they like? Well, the king of Rwanda was the one I knew best, and I can say he was kingly. Very devout Catholic, but you knew you were in the presence of something different, something unusual. Um, one of the things that a very impressive moment, which I'll never ever forget. He came down to L.A. in '94, and we had a large number of security personnel that were detailed to him. It was donated by the security company, as some sort of gesture. So there were, I guess, maybe 10 or 11 of these folks, 12 maybe. And these are pretty rough, tough guys. They weren't, a lot of them ex-cops, ex-military, and so forth. Well, they were with the king for almost 2 weeks. And me, I was the ADC, we say. And that was an interesting time. Went all over LA, took him to various things. But the last night, when he said farewell to them, it was the weirdest scene. It was in a house in Arcadia that I had gotten put at our disposal. And the king sat in a chair. And it just happened. One by one, every one of these guys went up to him and knelt in front of him. And he blessed them. It was amazing. And these were not dyed-in-the-wool monarchists by any
Catholic?
stretch.
Were they
a lot of them
Catholic?
weren't even Catholic. Some of them were Catholic, but a lot of them weren't. They went up, dropped to their knees, and he made the sign of the cross on each of their foreheads. And, there wasn't a dry eye in the house, as they say. And then they all took their leave. And I'll never forget what he said after they left. He said, "That is really the problem for you Americans. You're orphans." I've never forgotten that. Because
that's getting to me just listening to that story, to be honest.
Well, it is a very different thing from what we are used to. I mean, you think of Emperor Karl, who all during his death bed was saying, "I am suffering that my peoples might come back together." There is to monarchy, beyond the rational arguments, which I'm certainly capable of making, and the historical arguments, all that. There is something else, something deep in the human psyche that it touches. I remember a poem from 1715 about the Scottish lords, the Earl of Huntly, went over to the Hanoverian king and betrayed King James, the Stuart. But the refrain of the poem goes, "O my king, God save my king, whatever me befall, I would not be in Huntly's place for honours, lands, and all." And when you think of the tons of people who went into exile for their king, from the United States, from France, the emigres, the Jacobites who went all over the world for the Stuarts, the White Russians who left Russia after the Romanovs, and on and on and on and on and on. There is nothing quite like it in the annals of Republican governance. Nothing. Now, that doesn't mean that they're all great or wonderful people or all heroic, not by a long shot, but more of them are than we tend to produce. There are a ton of royal saints. I can't think of a single president who would qualify for that in any country. Maybe Garcia Moreno, but he was a monarchist. So, one of the the thing about monarchy is that it very much engages the emotions. When I was working on Star Spangled Crown, the scene in front of the White House when the youngest prince is killed and his body is brought home, and our narrator's favorite cousin has just died. When I was writing that, there were tears in my eyes, even though none of it had happened. I made it up. But it's the kind of thing that happens under a monarchy. And there were a number of real-life scenes that were in my head when I was writing it. One of them being the return of the body of the Duke of Kent in World War II to his brother, King George, because he was killed in an air crash. And, and the crowds were outside Buckingham Palace and so forth. And they sang to the king. It is a mystery. Monarchy is as much a mystery as the faith or as anything else. Like the faith, there's a ton of it that's quite rational and makes perfect sense. But then there's beyond. There's the coronation, the anointing, this eighth sacrament, this strange mystery. But as to what they're like, unassuming usually, the very opposite of snobbish. Because remember, snobbery and that kind of thing comes from people who have something to prove. But a king doesn't have to prove anything. It simply is. I used to joke with the king of Rwanda that it was really a pity that because he was a very poor man, when he was deposed, he had nothing. All of his assets were frozen, and the government took them. So I told him, I said, if only you had been a president instead of a king. And he said to me, yes, I know, I teased the king of Rwanda. Well, something people have to just accept. I tease. Anyway, I said, if only you'd been a president, Your Majesty. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, if you'd been the president of Rwanda, you'd have had 3/4 of the country's gold reserve shipped off to a Swiss bank account, within a month of your inauguration. And once you were deposed, you'd be on Easy Street. And I'd be there too. Instead, it was, oh, my people, my nation, they are my treasure. Yeah. We can't spend that, can we, Your Majesty?
Gosh. What was his response?
Oh, he laughed. He had a very good sense of humor. He was a very, very funny man, actually. Mm. You have to be, because he'd seen everything go south on him.
Yeah.
He spent years in exile around the borders of Rwanda. And then in 90 or 91, whenever it was, he got wind of the terrible genocide that was about to take place. So he managed to get to Washington in hopes of warning the United States government about it, but they would do something. That didn't happen.
What didn't happen? He wasn't able to warn, or they didn't do anything?
They didn't do anything. He was able to warn. Didn't do any good. Not a bit. Not one little tiny bit. And so the result, of course, was horror.
Okay. Some heavy stuff, Charles.
Well.
Okay. Next question is from Thomas. Gosh, this is such a dramatic transition we're doing here, because we've gone into like the depths of human emotion, and now we're gonna do this.
Well.
Okay. Boy, I really messed up the arrangement of these questions. Okay. All right. Next question is from Thomas. What are some of Charles's favorite American folk tales revolving around monsters like the Jersey Devil or Mothman? Which does he actually believe in, if any?
Oh, what a great segue!
Gosh.
Well, okay. How do I do this? Well, firstly, I do like both the Jersey Devil and Mothman.
Yeah.
I'm kind of partial to lake monsters, Ogopogo and all that. in Lake Champlain and the Finger Lakes and so forth. I like all those. Bigfoot is a
Yeah.
big favorite always.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, the uh, all sorts of that kind of local thing. I'm all for the Lemurians on Mount Shasta. You bet.
What?
Now, what's that?
What did you say?
The Lemurians on Mount Shasta.
Those are creatures?
No, they're people, members. They're residents of the great lost continent of Lemuria, which sat in the Pacific the way Atlantis did in the Atlantic. Highly civilized before the Great Flood, of course. They were extraordinary. But then Lemuria sank beneath the seas. However, some of their folk to this day live on the very heights of Mount Shasta, coming down to trade in the local villages with gold and so on.
Where did you draw that? What's your source there?
Newspaper
Oh,
clippings.
it's not. Okay, so
So what?
unlike the lost city of Atlantis, which had some perhaps credible sources.
Excuse me. I think I know where you're going with this. Okay. I know where you're going with this.
Yeah.
Firstly, one of the most important sources was Guy or Pa Ballard.
Who is that?
He, with his wife, Edna or Ma Ballard, was the founder of a religious group called the Great I Am.
What?
The Great I Am. They even have a church in Pasadena, for heaven's sakes. You probably weren't aware that a group of ascended masters, even as we speak, are hovering over Los Angeles, and they include in their number the deathless Count of Saint Germain.
I don't even know what you're saying.
Look it up. The immortal Count of Saint Germain.
Oh, the Count of Saint Germain. All right.
Yes,
yeah.
he's one of the ascended masters that hover above Los Angeles. And the Ballards were in touch with them, as they were in touch with Lemurians on Mount Shasta.
Okay, so let's get to the second part of this question, which is...
Well, wait. Now, hold on there. I'm sensing disbelief. I am suspecting incredulity. You realize it is this spirit of disbelief and doubt that is destroying our country. This is the kind of thing that will see us all one day confined to our homes.
Well... Wow, I guess you got me there, Charles.
Yes, I did. You're responsible because of your disbelief in the Count of Saint Germain and the Lemurians. But to answer the question, which of them do I believe in, if any? Well, firstly, with the possible exception of the Lemurians and the Count of Saint Germain, these sorts of folktale-ish monsters, let's put it this way. It is easier to prove that something does exist than that it doesn't. I have never seen the Jersey Devil. But I wouldn't be surprised if there was something or other that served as the foundation of the legend. I don't know what. Same with Bigfoot. Same with, what was the other one? Oh, the Mothman. I don't know, and of course my personal favorite, talked about, forget the Lemurians, the Men in Black. Now see, the Men in Black, you don't know about, but I'm willing to tell you. There is a very developed UFO mythology.
Before the movie.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It's where the movie got the idea from.
Yeah.
So the basic thing is that supposedly UFO researchers who get too close to the truth will get visited by the men in black. Now, these people are supposed variously to be either government agents, like the folks in the movie, or aliens themselves, because there are all sorts of weird things about them, or even interdimensional beings.
Where did this originate from?
The 50s, like everything else. There was there were a rash of UFO books and so forth, and several of the people that specialize in this kind of thing claim to have been visited by the men in black. Now, there's another reason we should all be grateful to be on lockdown, because the men in black are out there as well.
My favorite one is monster is in South America.
Chupacabra.
That's right. I love that word, La Chupacabra.
Chupacabra.
Yeah. There's actually like weird creatures out there that they've actually got actual pictures. It's pretty freaky creatures. Do you believe in Chupacabra?
Well, as I say, it would be easier to prove that it did exist than that it didn't. And, there are all these reports of them, so who knows? I know.
Okay.
I mean, I take a very agnostic view of this stuff.
Except fairies.
Well, simply because fairies have a much longer background to them. I mean, the fairy stories go back to the Church Fathers. Won't find no chupacabra, no man in black in St. Jerome.
I don't feel you're being told... Because to me, you lean more toward fairies than dragons.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised about dragons either.
Yeah, but I'm just saying you have a special affinity for fairies.
It's only because I've lived in Hollywood so long. I've seen them.
Oh, wow.
You were waiting for that one to come out.
Oh, man. Okay.
No. It was just, I've only come to believe in elves and so forth after the DNA that was done.
Wait, what?
I say I've only really started to come to believe in elves and so forth after our family DNA was done.
Yes, primarily human.
Primarily human. It was the other stuff that led me to believe in the reality of elves and so forth.
All right.
I mean, if I stopped believing in them, it would be the beginning of self-doubt. Where did that 14% of our DNA come from? Exactly.
All right.
I asked my brother that question, and you know what he did?
What?
He flitted up into the branches of a tree and said, "I think you're being silly."
He floated up into the branches of a tree?
Flitted up.
Oh, flitted up. Excuse me.
Down to the branches of a tree, looked down at me and said, "You're being silly."
Okay. Well, let's take this conversation back to Earth, shall we? And let's.
Okay, we can do that.
Yeah, let's move forward with a question from Donald.
All right, so we're moving forward now.
We're moving forward. Yes.
All right.
What can you share with us about Catholic priests of the 19th and 20th century? Father Lovasick, Father Francis Lasance, Father Daniel Lord, and Father Michael Muller, who each in their respective ways contributed greatly to catechesis, devotional work, and children's literature.
Well, Father Lovasick, I spoke to him on the phone once, I think. And I know he was a friend of mine, Brother Leonard Mary. Father Lovasick wrote a lot, tons of really good, really solid catechetical stuff for children.
Yeah, I think we sell some of it.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. Yeah. I know Catholic Treasures did. You're going to be upset with me when I tell you this, but he was Slovak.
That's good. That makes sense. Okay.
But, I really didn't know a lot about him except his work. He was very, very devout and really just a good guy, you know. Uh, Father Lasance, same thing. I know him primarily through his work. Uh, he did the Young Man's Guide, the Young Woman's Guide, and he did an edition of the Missal, which has an extraordinary set of explanations. And the foreword of it was, the prologue rather, was very, very good. It has this wonderful word picture of the Mass going around the planet. But it also had one section that was filled with references to a book called The Mass and Its Folklore, which, having read about it in Father Lasance, I found it in the library, fell in love with it. It's a short book, and then suggested the Tumblar House reprint it. And you know what Tumblar House did?
We reprinted it.
Yeah. So it was really, really, he did some great work there. Father Daniel Lord, Jesuit, started something called the Queen's Work. The Jesuits in those days, and we're talking about the 30s and 40s and 50s now, were very much into the sodalities of Our Lady. After Vatican II, most of those got morphed into what are called Christian life communities. But Daniel Lord called his particular apostolate the Queen's Work. The Queen in question being Our Lady.
Yeah.
And it had a certain amount of effectiveness, I guess. And then the last person you mentioned, Father Michael Muller, was a German Redemptorist in the last part of the 19th century. Wrote a lot of books, made a lot of converts, got into a lot of trouble because he was sort of the 19th century Father Feeney. He preached extra ecclesiam nulla salus the way he had been taught in Germany and got into a lot of trouble over it in the United States.
Makes sense.
Well, we don't need the church to go to heaven, and that's something that the church men have tacitly taught for a long time. We see the fruits of it now.
Yeah.
Because the sacraments are not necessary. We don't really need them. And it's interesting. I tweeted this. Those of us who are without the sacraments now are finding out what it's like to be outside the church.
Yeah, that's what you keep telling me.
It's true.
It's horrible.
Well, you see, Catholics, like being human beings and stuff, tend to take things for granted, and they don't realize the importance of the sacraments. Especially, we have a lot of non-Catholic friends who seem to be getting along quite well without them. Well, now you have a taste of what their lives are like. When you're trying to evangelize a non-Catholic, you're basically trying to give them what you're missing now. They've never had it.
Yeah.
So they don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And in a way, neither do we, because we can't imagine life without it. But now, ladies and gentlemen, now you'll understand better what it is they're being denied.
Yeah.
And this may well, for some of you, ladies and gentlemen, some of us, may cause a bit of a revolution in the way we look at things. Maybe I want my friends to have what I have and not to live where I've been living the past few weeks.
Yeah, Father Spitzer yesterday on EWTN, he was saying, because he's very scientifically minded, he's one of the best Jesuits I know, and he says he studying the virus, he says God's fingerprints are all over this thing, in terms of how it's structured, and sort of how it's kind of not like the Spanish flu, and some of these other things, in that, it's going to be a wake-up call for the young people. And I hope he's right. I'm going to take this into a tangent, something that I've been thinking of this week, because we are all wondering of when things go back to normal, God willing, how the virus would will affect church attendance. And so, there's, some people are going to say, well, why bother? Life's the same without it, at least to them. And some people are going to value it more. But what hit me this week, what I was wondering, is what the impact on Protestant churches. See, because we're actually missing sacraments. We're losing out on grace, and we can feel it in the depths of our being.
Yeah.
They're missing out on words.
Well, not just words. They're also missing out on a particular kind of fellowship.
Well, but this is America, though, and you can get fellowship. I mean, I guess so. But what I was wondering is if Protestant churches are going to experience a continued drop-off more because they're not getting the sacraments. They're not getting something so much deeper.
It might. I mean, it's an interesting question. And certainly the mainline churches who have such an elderly population anyway, this really can't be good for them. The Episcopalians, the United Methodists, and so forth.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it'll be interesting to see. The other question is, where will gender studies and non-binary and all that drivel be after this?
Yeah, so before, in previous episodes, you would say that people are just not going to tolerate this anymore. But you think even with a return to normalcy, that it's still going to be dropped? I thought you were talking about in times of, almost post-apocalyptic.
Yeah, I mean, if we go back to normality, see, a lot depends on what that normality is going to look like. It's hard to say. I mean, look at 9/11, which is the closest thing to this that we have to look at. Things were weird and different for about a year. And then slowly but surely, the flags were put away. People they went back to where they had been, more or less. There were certain changes. But pretty much, people reverted to where they had been. I remember reading an interesting article, because as you recall, once again, the flag was being flown constantly after 9/11.
Yeah.
And, God Bless the USA was playing every other second on the radio. And I remember reading a piece by a liberal lady in the LA Times, wrestling with herself over, because, she, as a post-Vietnam baby, she'd been very much against flag waving and so on and so forth. She didn't know how she felt about it, so on and so forth. But then in the end of the article, she says, well, I'll put up the flag. And I'm sure a lot of people felt the way she did. But time passed. There were no more new terrorist attacks. That feeling of unity that the nation had in the immediate wake of 9/11 vanished. And we were back going down the road we've been going down since. So, I don't know. It all depends on things I can't foretell. Don't have my tarot cards with me, and they wouldn't tell me anyway.
Well, let's keep that. Yeah. Okay. Why don't you throw out those tarot cards, Charles?
I don't have them here.
Oh, okay. Good.
If I did have them, they certainly wouldn't tell. They didn't tell me about the pandemic.
Okay.
You don't use them for fortune telling. I've gotten better advice about the future from Chinese fortune cookies than I ever have from tarot cards. It's true. But
Okay.
anyone who goes to a Chinese restaurant's an occultist. No, it's true, especially if they open the fortune cookie. Obviously, they're worshiping Baal.
Okay.
Everybody knows that.
Um.
If you celebrate Halloween, you're a Satanist. And if you believe in candles during prayer, you're in Wicca.
Okay. Well, thanks for telling us these things, Charles. We'll watch out for that.
Well, remember, the only way to be safe from anything is to do what we're doing now. Stay at home. Be safe. Keep the doors locked. It's comfy and warm in here.
Unfortunately, all these things combined make us go insane.
Oh, like that's a problem. What have you got against insanity? Did it ever occur to you that insanity has rights too? It deserves a hearing.
All work and no play makes Vinny a dull boy.
Exactly. If you're not willing, what has sanity ever really done for you anyway? Yeah.
Okay.
Gotcha there. Sanity is a losing proposition.
You're dangerous. I don't know if this was pre-show or full episode because it's starting to bleed together now. But
this is the episode.
No, I know, but when we were talking about this, but you're dangerously random.
Oh, yeah, I don't remember
Dangerously
either.
random.
Chaotic neutral.
Chaotic neutral. I'm gonna title the episode that already. Chaotic neutral.
Break down all the barriers, ladies and gentlemen. Free yourself from linear thinking. Rip it all out. Break the chains of coherence. I want you all to go out in the street right now and shriek in your loudest.
You know what you are right now? You're, oh gosh, I can't remember the name, but you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. It's the crazy guy on the movie Network.
Oh, yeah, Beale.
I've had enough and I'm not going to take it anymore.
I'm mad as hell and
Yeah.
I'm not going to take it anymore.
Yeah, that's who you are right now.
Howard Beale. He had a certain... He knew what cooked. Let me tell you, that boy knew. And, the mad prophet of the airwaves. That's what they called him in Network. Yeah, that was a great movie.
Yeah.
And the sad thing is that TV has gone precisely the way they predicted it would.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, great stuff. Golly, who could forget Faye Dunaway?
I could. I don't like Faye Dunaway.
She likes you.
No?
Well,
I'm glad she does. Okay. Are you ready for the next question?
We are ready.
Right, from Theo. I'm hoping to get married and start a family. As a thought experiment, if anywhere were possible, where would you recommend moving to in the world to prolong escaping that hideous strength for as long as possible?
I would say you want to move either to Manhattan or West Hollywood.
That doesn't sound right.
Well, all right. I wouldn't recommend those things. What I would recommend you do, however, is don't... How do I put this? Don't fall into the Mary Crest trap of thinking that there's someplace safe where you can go and avoid all this stuff. You are where you are for a given reason. look at whatever resources you've got in your immediate area. I mean, I don't say you've got to feel trapped where you are forever, but bear in mind that trying to escape that hideous strength has never been a viable option for Catholics. We're called to be in the world, but not of it. My father and mother raised us in Manhattan and Hollywood, which, from the standpoint of the faith, were terrible. But their influence on us was greater than that of our environment. And they introduced us to all sorts of things to help us keep the faith. And I may say, had worked out a lot of strategies for keeping the faith in a hostile environment. Now, a lot depends on a lot. If your first language is English, you certainly don't want to go somewhere that isn't English speaking, unless you know the other language very well. I had one friend of mine who thought he'd go to Chile for this very purpose, because he understood that the faith was still big in Chile. There's this, there's that, and so on. We went down there. They stayed maybe 5 years, but it didn't fit. There are places that are very nice, like New England, but notice that the nicest places generally have the craziest governments. So if I were you, Theo, I would look at my own place, my own country, and figure out what was best there. But not in terms, purely as a strategy, not to escape that hideous strength.
But, what's underneath all this, too, is you should love your people and your country and your state. As crazy as California is, it's home to me. And you want to evangelize it. And for me, we're blessed with a history with the missions, with Junipero Serra.
Yeah.
And that's an unfulfilled mission right there. I mean, do we just jump off? I mean, I don't feel it's fitting to just jump off and say, well, not going to work.
No, it's not. And also you've got to bear in mind, when the apostles went out from Palestine, they went to where they could evangelize. And, every country now on earth, every region on earth has a story of missionaries. And wherever we are, we should try to link up with that history. If you're in California, as you say, Father Serra and the Spanish missions and all that sort of thing. And, the people that came later, the Gold Rush priests, the people like that, who were, too little known. Wherever you are, you should really try to plug in to whatever Catholic heritage there is and make it live.
And this also touches on sort of one of the least talked about virtues of the three, which is hope. Just because our country comes from Protestant or, loosely Protestant roots, from, the founding fathers at least. I mean, I'm not referring to Spain or France, but the founding fathers, that doesn't mean it's never going to happen. Everywhere where Catholicism flourishes now or at once upon a time, there was a time where it's completely heathen.
Yeah.
So you have to have
France
hope.
was pagan, Italy was pagan, Spain was pagan.
Yeah. And there's no reason why it can't happen in the United States. And one of obviously the great novels of hope, well, no, actually, honestly, the greatest novel, which is Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings. And don't forget what happens to the Shire in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And at the end, that's very important. That's a very important thing precisely to tackle this question. Like, oh, can we just go to the Shire somewhere and escape and be fine forever? No.
No.
They're going to come
No, we
after
can't.
you. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it was the same. Actually, you cite that hideous strength there. It was the same with that hideous strength. With the book. If they didn't deal with the evil there and then, it would have encompassed the whole world. There was no question of their running from it.
So much of it, it's a very hard exercise, but we've got to change the lens that we see, how we see the world. As trads, it's easy for us, to see the bad in everything, see the danger in everything. That's the protective impulse. But we have to flip that around. I've been reading St. Francis a lot, and this is what he did. You see the good in people. You see the good in things, because that's Jesus' presence is in us. So it's hard to do, but it's something I feel like we need to constantly practice, is seeing the good in people, in places.
And seeing them as souls to be converted. We don't. We look at our friends, we look at our family who aren't Catholic, and we don't look at them as souls who need what we have. We look at them either as friends and family who somehow, just because they're close to us, they don't need any more than that. Or we look at them as the evil other with whom we must have nothing to do. But either way, what we don't try to do is give them what we have. And as I say, now you know what it is we have by virtue of not having had it.
Isn't that funny how everything is always unbalanced, where either you're the one tendency is there is no mixture of good and evil. You're either totally evil and, you're a lost cause, or you're totally good. That view, where it's just totally... Or the other view, which is, as Mother Angelica would call, is fueled by misguided compassion, where you can't worry about everything. Everything will be great. You love everybody, but that also means you don't do anything.
No. You just love.
And it's funny how it's one extreme. Like, it's one extreme or the other. It's so hard to reach that middle ground.
Well, that's because, our fallen nature delights in the snap, simple answer. The complex answer, especially one that requires any effort out of me, I'm not interested in.
That's very true.
What else we got?
Okay. Next question is from Marlon.
Hello, Marlon.
I'm 18 years old, and I was wondering if I should go straight into seminary or transfer to a Catholic college. I've spent a year in community college after high school, and I think I need to go to a seminary. I may transfer to a Catholic college like Ave Maria University.
Well, Marlon, obviously you're thinking about a vocation, so go for it. Test your vocation, see if that's what you want. If it is, then persevere and get ordained. We need good priests. Don't look at the seminary purely as a means to an education. And if you find you don't have a vocation at the priesthood, well, then you've got to figure out what it is you do have a vocation to. And that's a whole other kettle of fish. But go ahead, try the seminary, see what happens. Worst that can happen is you'll get some clarity.
Yeah. All right. Next question is from Brian. What were the roles of positions such as the secret cleric and secret chaplain of honor abolished in papal liturgies by Paul VI.
Well, they weren't abolished liturgies per se, but they were positions of the papal court and papal ceremonies. These were the chamberlains. Some of them were lay, and some of them were clerical. The laymen wore very nice Spanish Renaissance uniforms with, knee breeches and capes and the ruffled collars and all that. I mean, they looked like something out of the 1500s.
Nice.
It was. But, Paul VI, he never saw anything he had inherited that he didn't want to simplify, because simple is prettier. So he, I mean, they had privy chamberlains, confidential privy chamberlains, all sorts. There was a whole bunch of ranks. But he tossed it all out in 1969, 1970.
Okay. Next question from Robert. Could Charles give his opinion on the right to bear arms? I have no problems with my neighborhood owning a sword or a lance, say. But what about him owning an AK-47? What is this? What do you got? You got arms?
I'm bearing my arms.
That reminds me of a T-shirt where it says, in favor of the right to bear arms, except the guy's arms are actually a bear's arms.
Oh, well.
It's an actual right to bear arms.
Well, I think everyone should have it.
Yeah.
No, well, I'm all for the right to bear arms, but the way it's put, I mean, my neighbor having an AK-47, unless you live in my old neighborhood, the likelihood of your neighbor having an AK-47 is very, very minor. What he will probably have is either a handgun, or he will have a hunting rifle. Or if you live on the farm, he may very well have a shotgun for varmints. So what do I think about that? Fine. Bear in mind, I was born and spent the first 6 years of my life in a place called New York. And in the city of New York, they have something called the Sullivan Act. Ever since 1876, it has been illegal to own firearms in New York.
Yeah.
You can't own them. But what has really happened as a result?
What has happened? I don't know.
The law-abiding are defenseless, and the criminals rob as they choose. That's what happens. It's better now. Well, maybe it's slipping now, but of course, Giuliani helped a great deal because of his efficient manner of policing. But New York had become, you took your life in your hands when you went on the subways in the 70s and early 80s.
Yeah.
And there was the very famous story of Bernhard Goetz, who went armed onto the subway. Sure enough, they tried to rob him, and he pulled out a gun and shot him up. Now he went to jail for a little bit, but the only one of those guys that he shot that isn't now in jail on other crimes is the one he put in a wheelchair. So I mention that not because I think it's a good thing to shoot up the subway.
Yeah.
But I mention it because, as opposed to theory, real life shows that unarmed communities tend to be victimized more than armed ones. I remember mutatis mutandis. I remember during the riots in Milwaukee a few years ago, this black lady was complaining that they were rioting and burning their own neighborhood. And why didn't they go into the suburbs, the white neighborhoods? Well, I can tell you why they didn't, because the Milwaukee suburbs are armed to the teeth. And rioters, being human beings, as a rule, do not like to go where they may get killed. It's a weird, I don't know what you call it. It's like a complex or a syndrome they have. I remember during the 92 riots in LA, the Beverly Hills Police Department were given orders to shoot to kill if the rioters crossed the city line. Well, Bunch of rioters came up to the Beverly Hills city line. 3 or 4 of them crossed it. Pop, pop, pop. Boom, boom, boom. They went elsewhere.
Yeah.
I don't know why. During the same riots in Koreatown, some of the building owners had ex-Korean Rangers armed with some machine guns on their roofs. You want to know something funny that happened?
What?
Well, a lot of the buildings were torched, but the buildings that had armed people with some machine guns on the roofs weren't torched.
What a coincidence. What do you think is behind this fetish against guns? I mean, what is driving it?
I think there's several things. For a lot of people, there is the fear that, of course, they'll be used for crimes, but that's going to happen whatever you do.
We see that on a state-by-state basis. These people who tout science all the time and data, let's look at the data. Yeah, let's look at the data. Shall we?
I'd rather not. It's very unpleasant. And I think also with government, there's sort of a... it's kind of like now with the shutdowns, some of our government officials, you have a feeling, almost enjoy the sense of power that shutting everything down gives them. And I certainly don't mean to say that that's all of it, not by any stretch. But they're human beings. And what do we know about human beings? They tend to abuse everything they get their little hands on. So, there is something... I mean, look at Justin Bieber Trudeau in Canada. Because this fellow went a bit cray-cray after being locked down for weeks with his girlfriend. He shoots her, and then goes on a rampage. So Justin Bieber Trudeau's response is to ban what he calls military-style handguns, not military-style guns. Well, the problem, of course, is that doesn't really exist in Canadian law. He sort of made it up.
Yeah.
But, one of the things you find about modern leadership today is that they're as ignorant as their subjects, and they make things up. Not necessarily out of malice, but because they don't know anything anyway.
Yeah.
If, let's say you're in charge, and you want to do something. Well, what's easier, to just do it and then figure out the legalities later? Or go to all this legal stuff that, number one, you don't know about anyway, and number two, may impede you from doing what you want to do?
Yeah. Number one, the former.
Yeah, of course. So that's what they do. And, let the lawyers sort it out.
Okay. Let's see here. Oh, last question today from James.
Okay.
I came across an article by Charles called A Jacobitism for the 21st Century. As an Englishman, traditionalist, and aspiring Catholic, I'm opposed to the liberalism that saturates movements on the right in Britain, as well as the national founding myths of the Reformation and Glorious Revolution of 1688. I think the ideals of Jacobitism and its related movements have much to offer us in the way of a positive conception of politics, particularly in the Anglosphere, where many of us have moved away from mainstream conservatism, I think in part due to some of the reasons I mentioned. I thought your article was a great read, and I wanted to ask if you would restate for your listeners what the study of Jacobite ideals can offer us, as well as recommend a book or two for some further reading. Cheers and God bless.
Yeah. All right, well, let's do the books first. The Jacobite Movement by Charles Petrie. Anything by Jane Lane, Farewell to the White Cockade, things like that. Murray Pittock's The Invention of Scotland. Evelyn Cruikshank's Jacobitism and the English People. Or was that Monad? Well, anyway, anything by Evelyn Crookshanks about the Jacobites. So, what can we learn from them? Well, a number of things, frankly. The first is about the relationship of church and state. They believed, of course, that the monarch, and so the government, derived their authority from God himself. But that authority is mediated through the church. And for most of the Stuarts, that meant the Catholic Church. And how was this concretely demonstrated? Through the coronation. Through the king acting as defender of the faith. And the interesting thing, people bag on Prince Charles for being wanting to be defender of faith or defender of the faiths or some such. They forget that, in a sense, the Stuart kings in exile had to do that, because even though they were Catholic, they favored Catholics. There were a lot of Protestants in their entourage. And interestingly enough, if you go to Rome today and you want to see the bodies, not the bodies themselves, but the graves of poets like Keats and Shelley, you've got to go to the Protestant cemetery in Rome. Well, who founded that cemetery? It was founded by King James III when he was in Rome in exile for his Protestant courtiers. So, and it was for them that the first Anglican services ever occurred in Rome with the papal permission. And for that matter, King James II, although he was Catholic, he was the head of the Church of England with papal permission. So, at any rate, the place of religion in public life, the place of the church. The second thing to be learned is what kind of a monarchy then should we have? Not a figurehead monarchy like the House of Hanover and their successors, but, for want of a better word, an executive monarchy. A monarch who rules as well as reigns, like the President of the United States. But unlike the President, not the head of it was not just the party head, but the head of government, the sovereign for everyone. Able to make long-term decisions in terms of foreign policy and defense, having to deal with Parliament as far as extraordinary expenses, and that sort of thing. What's the third thing we can learn from them? Well, while the king may be supreme in things like defense and foreign policy, local liberties, subsidiarity. Concretely, in the British case, this meant an end to the union of parliaments between England and Scotland and Ireland. But you see, the effectiveness of the king in administering each of his three kingdoms meant that personal union was effective, as opposed to, say, the union between Canada and Britain today. Were the current British monarchy run along Stuart lines, then on the one hand, England, Scotland, and Ireland would be no closer to each other in one sense than those three countries and Canada, except that the king would reign and rule each of those three kingdoms and Canada. You see, so they'd at once be further apart than they are now, but also closer.
I see.
And the same goes for the shires and towns, local liberties. And then the fourth thing to learn from them is the idea of not class conflict, but class cooperation. The nation is an organic family. And yet retaining its diversity. I mean, it's interesting when you think that the Stuarts were supported by everybody from Scottish clansmen to London mobsters. I don't mean like a crime family. I
Oh.
mean the London mob,
Mm-hmm.
the forerunners of the proletariat. To Oxford students, Oxford was a big center of Jacobitism. These are all very varied, but they all supported the Stuarts for different reasons. Because one of the great things about a monarchy is that the monarch can have, within the bigger identity of king, he can have a particular relationship with you and your region and people. Yeah, he may well be the king, and that's fine, but he's the Duke of Lancaster, and that's where he and I really come into it. So then there's a fifth and last thing to pick up from them, and that is the idea of a Catholic nation, a Catholic monarchy, a Catholic kingdom, being part of the larger framework of Christian nations as a whole. Sadly, that doesn't mean there might not be conflict or wars between them, but nevertheless, they've got a relationship with each other that they don't have with something outside the family. So I think that's a good starting point anyway. The monarchy I describe in Star Spangled Crown that I invented for the United States is essentially a Stuart monarchy. So I would recommend Star Spangled Crown too, by Charles A. Coulombe, available from Tumbler House. If you get that book and any other so that your order is over $25,
you get free shipping on your order. Isn't that amazing?
Free shipping and handling?
That's right, Charles.
No CODs?
No COD. Limited time offer. Void where prohibited. While supplies last. Operator standing by. Act now.
We got all of our late night ad drivel out.
Yeah.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, the time, I think, has come. Mickey's little hand is, oh, never mind. But there are a couple of things I'd like you to take away with you from our time together this evening, or this morning, or whatever it is, wherever you are. Try to enjoy this time as much as you can. Use the leisure. Read. Do stuff you can't do in normal times. Sing to your kid. Do something you wouldn't do otherwise. Make use of it. Don't just let it be dead space. Secondly, and this is very, very important, while I've been joking about being warm and cozy and all that, it's not a bad way to look at it. Try to enjoy where you are, even if where you are is a 30-story skyscraper with a staff that do anything you tell them to do, no matter how stupid. Not that you would ever order them to do something stupid, but anyway, I'm sure you would never dream of doing that. But enjoy your home in a way perhaps you've never been able to do before. But wait, there's more. Get to know your neighbors a little bit if you can. Explore some of the local sites you've never gone to, the local parks and so on. That's all, all usable stuff. Pardon me. You all want to bear in mind that we've just begun the month of May, Mary's month. So double down on those Marian devotions. Maybe you can see a May crowning somewhere. And don't forget, toward the end of the month, I think it's the 23rd this year, the 24th. No, it's the 23rd, 25th this year, I think. Is Memorial Day, Decoration Day, if you're an American. And that is a good day to honor our dead in our innumerable conflicts, the beginning of summer. And if you're Canadian, well, May the 24th, you call it Victoria Day. But before it was Victoria Day, throughout Britain and Australia and New Zealand and all that, it was Empire Day.
Hmm.
So you could think about all the other countries in the empire.
All right. Very good, Charles.
There, feel better?
Feel better.
All right.
All right. So remember, if it's Monday
It's off the menu.
and the soul you save.
May be your own.
See you next time.
Take care, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be here next week. Make sure you are.